Americans who have lived abroad, biggest reverse culture shock upon returning to the US. A massive amount of advertising and upsells. As soon as you get on a plane back to the US, it's all sign up for this credit card and watch these ads before and after the safety briefing. And you can pay later for all this. No payments today. It absolutely screams into your brain at every opportunity. Music in restaurants is so loud. It took me a second to remember that first floor is ground/lobby floor here every time I got in an elevator for a few weeks. How uncommon it is seeing people smoking cigarettes in the US. When my wife and I visited NYC, we were super jet-lagged, flying in from Europe. Our first trip in the subway honestly felt like it was taken out of a movie or TV show. An Orthodox Jew, a Muslim, and some other dudes were jovially discussing the best route somewhere. We must have looked very jet-lagged because a dude who I'm pretty sure was homeless asked us where we were going and offered to help us get there. When we got off at the stop, he said was the right one, he just ambled over and opened the emergency exit and waved us through. We kind of panicked about that until we saw that the rest of the people on their way out were like, "Oh, someone opened the shortcut, nice," and walked through. He showed us how to get to the hotel, and we got there super fast. He didn't want any money or food or anything. He just helped us. I didn't think NYC was any more or less rude than anywhere else we've visited in the States. It's one of my favorite cities I've visited in the US. Going from Japan customer service to US customer service is a colossal downgrade. Returned to the US from India. Sat down to eat at a restaurant at the airport, and the waiter immediately brought me a glass of ice water. It took me a moment to realize that this was safe to drink here. After being in India for a while, coming back to the USA, the feeling of having personal space and not being started at all the time, such a relief. Going into an American grocery store after years abroad is overwhelming, but also glorious. Coming back to the US from Cairo, it was not needing to be so alert all the time. There's a lot to like about Cairo, but it is a tourist city, and a lot of the businesses and locals take advantage of the tourists. It's a little thing, but you have to be ready to argue vehemently about every price and service. I didn't realize how much that was stressing me until I came home. Moved from Singapore, then back to the US. 3 biggest shocks. 1. Unlike Singapore, I can't expect everyone to know English in California. 2. An American striking a random conversation is normal. 3. Mexican food is the most American food around. Return to the US from Korea. It gets talked about all the time, but just how unnecessarily complicated and inconvenient our healthcare system is. To go from a system where you can go see a doctor specialist any day of the week without an appointment, to know you will be covered, and to have the peace of mind that you'll spend probably less than $20, to then go to whatever we have here, it's just absurd to me. I also pay twice for my healthcare here than I did in Korea. We are so duped for a system that is openly robbing us and not keeping us well. Flying from Shanghai back to Dallas was the biggest culture shock for me. Shanghai makes Dallas look like a ghost town. And the maglev train that runs over the city gives you a sense of scale like no other. Imagine being in a jet flying over a city that just seems to never end. Central. Fucking. Air conditioning. Outside of places like more affluent, developed Middle Eastern countries like UAE, Israel, and Kuwait, or like Singapore, AC is an absolute luxury. A lot of people in the US do not appreciate how good our HVAC capabilities are. After living in Korea and Japan, I will always forever appreciate the independence, individualism of American cultural. Especially in Korea, it felt like I joined gang cult when I realized even the simplest of tasks required the consensus of the entire office. I saw a 46YO feel like he didn't have enough authority to paper in the printer, so we had to wait and ask the office superior hours later. It's hard to describe in a small post. I just feel like there's a certain kind of autonomy that exists here that doesn't exist over there, with regards to work. Having to drive everywhere. Dublin isn't the most bike-friendly place, but living there for several years and being able to hop on my bike and get across town in 20 minutes is something I will always miss. After being back in Illinois for 2 years, I still hate that I have to drive 2 miles to Target. BC, that's the only option for getting there and home in one piece. ETA. At no point did I say I live in Chicago. I don't have city public transit and resources, thus my comment. The scam that is the for-profit healthcare system in the US. Truly pathetic that the richest country in human history can't provide universal coverage for all its citizens. Medical bills, medical debt, insurers deciding which procedures you really need, doctors and hospitals being in-out of network. All foreign concepts to most developed countries. We talk a lot about freedom in the US, but it's usually about positive freedoms, i.e., the freedom to own a gun. But we forget about negative freedoms, the freedom from something, such as medical debt, student debt, etc. In that sense, we lack many basic freedoms enjoyed by other countries. Coming back to the US after living in Japan for 7 years, everyone seems so angry and selfish all the time. Public places like parks, streets, restrooms are just a disgusting mess that no one takes care of. Also, groceries were super cheap and fresh. I could get a week's worth of groceries for a family of 3 for around 1,000 yen. That's not possible in the US. The food. Lived in Canada from 2006 to 2014. You don't really notice it going the other way, but coming back, holy shit. Everything is loaded with salt and sugar. Everything. It is jarring. I gained over 20 pounds my first year back. I get that people do not want to hear this because we all love our dino nuggets and cheap frozen pizza, but damn, they really are trying to kill us with our food. At the very least, they truly do not care if they kill us, so long as the profit margins are high. Related to that, the sheer number of truly obese people, kids in particular. I lived in Toronto, and it was incredibly rare to see a person who clearly weighed over 300 pounds, like maybe once a year. Coming back, it was just shocking how big the average American had become. I pretty much lay that at the feet of the food thing. I lived in South Korea for a few years. When I returned to my hometown, St. Louis, very little had changed. You can't walk anywhere in St. Louis County, and for the first time, that fact really got to me. My friends were also very sedentary and incurious, not wanting to go anywhere. I would go to a friend's house and they just wanted to watch Netflix, and I was so used to being a very active person. Lastly, when anyone asked me about Korea, they couldn't help but slip in a racist joke or two. I had changed overseas, but my hometown didn't. I lived in Japan for a year. Coming back to the States made me realize how dirty it is here, and people are lazy and disrespectful when it comes to taking care of the city and each other. In Japan, it's a collective effort. Public restrooms are clean. If you have trash, you put it in your pocket or purse and hold on to it until you can find access to a trash can. Here, people will drop it on the ground because they cannot dare to be inconvenienced. I've seen people at stoplights open their door and leave bags of McDonald's trash on the street and drive off so they can have a clean car. Of course, one of the first public restroom experiences when I came back home was in a store where there was a drainage grate in the floor, and a woman had her kid taking a piss in the grates instead of the toilet. And don't get me started how if they even have the sniffles, they wear a mask in public to be courteous, but here people like to cough directly into the wind. Coming back from Germany, Europe, and the customer service at US restaurants was so intrusive and annoying. You cannot just sit and enjoy a meal with someone. You are constantly interrupted while talking and while mid-chew. How is everything? Doing all right? Can I get you another drink? Etc. I get that some people like this type of service because they're used to or expect it, but it annoyed me to no end how the server constantly interrupted my meal. Edit. Nothing against the servers themselves, they're just doing their job. I wouldn't show my annoyance with someone trying to help me. It's more annoyance with the culture that this is an expected, normal kind of service.